Good evening. Welcome to this episode of Prophecy for the Last Hour. My name is Liz McGee. I am doing home recording again. I have a new way I'm working some of my teachings, but I do want to say, see this splashy background? I am a watercolor artist. That is what that's my tent making business. So I just decided to put that as my background because it is a part of me. That's one of my areas, but the other times I'm this lay researcher of all of the primary texts of the people of the book. This is one of the things I want to talk about tonight. I've had a really interesting weekend and there's a lot going on, and I think it's important that I try to define a little bit more where I'm coming from and my understandings to date. Okay, so I want to talk about, because there's a lot of buzzwords. I put these teachings out on YouTube, and I have found there are some people that are very adept at using trigger words, because if you understand about mind control, you use a trigger word and it just sort of makes all these emotions come up, all these preconceived concepts. It's just a word that it's like a fighting word. And unless you have a really kind of mature understanding of the word and its nuances, and you can get lost in the fray. So I want to say there's a couple of words here that have been used that I want to redefine a little bit more. One is gnostic, okay? And let me just come out saying, I am not a gnostic, okay? The people of the book, which is what I consider to be who we are as the house of Judah, the house of Ephraim, the two houses of Israel, we're the people of the book. And we are not Gnostics. Our tradition, our writing tradition, is not Gnostic. Now, I'm not going to in this session really, unless I have time at the end, explain that, okay? But I am going to talk about another trigger word that is called the Oral Torah, okay? And most of my listeners, I'm assuming, are really Ephraimites who are coming out of the nations, understanding our identity as the sheep of his pasture, lost sheep. We're coming back into our heritage and we're reclaiming it. And to do this, we have to go back to the older brother who's been holding on to all these texts, which is the house of Judah, okay, who was given prophetic birthright, that they would be the scribal house for their traditions, okay, their writings, their religion, for lack of a better word, okay? And so since we were lost and scattered among the nations, coming back, this is where we're going. We're beginning to understand their writings again, our writings. We're reclaiming our Hebraic roots, our Old Testament, this whole thing that's been growing, this branch, so to speak. Yashua is the branch, but there's been a plant of righteousness that we're all getting grafted into, has been growing for 6,000 years in the earth. I believe we're the elect of the last generation. Let me just say this one more thing. I would call myself an elect, okay? That's what I would call myself. I wouldn't go Christian or whatever. I would call myself right now an elect, and I'm going to call myself an elect-a-scene, and that's another trigger word. Oh, people just love these trigger words to throw out. And so let me get back to the people of the book. Okay. Oral Torah is a very real concept, truth in Hebraic writing. Okay. Let me just say this. I am growing daily in appreciation, not only for the word, but for my brethren, the house who have kept this. I don't think Gentile Christian, Hebrew roots person, whatever you are, whatever you want to call yourself, even a scene, whatever you want to call yourself, skeptic, seeker, whatever, I don't think we truly understand what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a holy God, Yahweh, who really did entrust something extremely valuable, a treasure, beyond comprehension, to a people group. And you know what? I have to say, by and large, they really kept, not perfectly, but they kept this body tight amongst themselves, and it is now available for us today. And I don't think even like we really understand, and we don't, what I'm trying to say is I don't think we understand yet the depth, the height, the depth, the breadth, and the width of what is really in these writings and in this house, okay? It says that 10, one person is going to find 10 Jews, and 10 people are going to find one Jew and like pull on his hem and say, teach us and teach us and teach us, because it is true. Now, let's get back to the Oral Torah. This is something that is a trigger word. People don't understand. They have a hard time, but I'm going to try to explain to you something about oral, okay? It is not what we think it is, all right? So let's just try to get some clarity on this issue. Now, I mean, you don't have to believe me, okay? I'm going to say this like sort of authoritative. Yeah, this is what the data is saying. This is what the research says. This is what a good Torah scholar will tell you, okay? There is a two-tiered, literal, allegorical mode of transmission of all of the writings, okay? There's a plain level meaning. There's what's called an exoteric level meaning, and there is esoteric understanding. Now, I'm sorry, that is a fact. And if you still have, and if you think that that is a gnostic, or you want to throw in this little word, oh, that's such a gnostic, that's just not true. Okay, that is a distortion of words and the concept behind words. Okay, that is the way that is the transmissional style that was instituted by Yah, in which he has kept his word going forward generation after generation after generation. Now, it is understood by the rabbis, and okay, so rabbi can be a trigger word. At this point, sages, people who deeply study and understand, and this is what I need to say, is I have a lot of respect for even Talmudic rabbis. These people, you do not understand, you person who gets up in the morning and reads a 5-minute devotional and goes off to your day and thinks that you're just totally good to go with God and have all wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. It doesn't work that way. It never worked that way in ancient Israel, okay? They understood what the powerhouse of wealth of understanding they were dealing with. They had a lot more respect, and they understood the years of dedicated, diligent study, memorization that would take to understand and to be able to comprehend and to gain a status of what was called wisdom, to be one of the wise, okay? So this literal allegorical, there is the literal level. When Yeshua spoke, he spoke in parables, and he told the people, this is what he said, look, I am speaking to you in an exoteric understanding, because that's what's been given to you. That's what you can understand, and that is fine. All right. But to his disciples, he was telling them on a deeper understanding, which was the allegorical understanding, which was sort of, the skinny behind it, what was being represented, because one of the ways this little allegorical thing works, there's a lot of prophecy in the Bible. Oh, is that a big shock, right? We all know this. But the fulfillment of the prophecies, its timing, how you know when things is hidden in the allegorical, many times, understanding. So Yeshua would explain to them like how he is fulfilling a lot of the prophecies about the Messiah, about himself as the Son of Man, all these different things, a lot of these allegorical understandings. That's what he's teaching them. The deeper means how it was couched in the scriptures and how they could really recognize him for who he said he was. Now, let me just say, so we know that there is a literal transmission, and this is where the halakha, the law, a lot of that is in a literal transmission. But rabbis have always known, and I'm going to use the word rabbi because a teacher, a sage, a Torah scholar, whatever, a prophet, someone who is deeply immersed will understand that there is a concealed mode. It is done via paradox. This is done in an allegorical style. This is not Gnostic. I'll say this again. It is the way the Hebrews understood that deeper truths were transmitted through time, especially prophecies, so that they could keep track of them and understand when their fulfillments would happen. These paradoxes were often appeared in many writings. This is what trips us up a lot. It was deliberately done in a non-rational or fantastical way. So in other words, you would read stuff, that just like, you go, oh my gosh, yeah, that's really happening. It would be, kind of larger than life, or it would be something so supranatural, or not of this, not literal, boots on the ground type of stuff. Okay, this is done deliberately. First of all, that's keying you in that we're talking about larger issues, and these you would have to be schooled in the ways of analysis, and this mode of transmission was nevertheless based on consistent rules and principles, such that those equipped with the keys would be able to unlock their meaning. To others, they would appear as non-rational or fantastical. That's why when a lot of people read the Apocrypha and a lot of the extra biblical books and Enoch and stuff, and it's like, oh my gosh, a lot of it is fantastic, but it's done in a deliberate style, sort of almost to scare people away. It's like, okay, but it is specifically that it is in that fantastical or non-rational way in which the allegory has been cloaked, and in which, now let me get to this. So this is what is called the keys of the kingdom. Another trigger word, a pesher. This is when you have the deeper allegorical understanding, which was handed down through an oral tradition. Okay, now let's unpack that trigger word. Okay, now Yashua talked about, there's a verse in Matthew, Matthew 11, 27. He says, all things have been handed to me by my Father. Now there's a couple of very key words in there. First of all, the whole concept of all things. It's not just anything. Okay, these are very, I guess I have this unbelievable respect for Hebrew. It is, and I'll get to that amazing language. But all things is a compound word. All and things. It's made up of two words, Strong's 3956, pos, which means each and every, in the sense of each and every part. Okay, and its emphasis on the total picture. It's like one part at a time. So in other words, it's all things, but it's each part that makes the whole. This is the concept of precept upon precept. Yah is a master builder. Paul calls it this concept. You don't build Rome in a day. You go precept by precept, concept by concept, letter by letter, thought by thought, theological construct by theological construct. There's a very defined, disciplined way in which you build your Torah understanding, and literally, specifically, how you copy your Torah, how you do all of these things. There is nothing haphazard in any of these processes. So Yeshua is saying, but this is the thing, there's a couple of key, oral Torah, another way of saying, is the tradition of the fathers. See, one of the problems we have today is, again, is in Hebrew, is we're trying to unpack all these Hebraic concepts and everything. First of all, we're not really in dialogue, really, with true Jewish Torah scholars, okay? In a one-to-one, like teacher, disciple to teacher, which is the best way. You can really ask questions, and you can really, we read their writings, we try to figure it out. That's really what most of us are doing, truly. But it wasn't always this way, okay? In Jude 1:3, it says, beloved, when I gave you all diligence to write unto you of the common salvation, it was needful for me to write unto you and exhort you that you should earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered unto the saints. Now, this concept of being delivered, or what is really, it is the word handed down. Okay, there is a word, it's tradition, and it comes from, it's translated many times tradition. Okay, and see, tradition isn't always bad. Okay, these, again, trigger words. We have to understand what type of traditional process are we talking about. We were talking about one that really Yah instituted, so we can be okay with it, or are we talking about made up traditions of men? Okay, I'm talking about the true Hebraic concept of tradition in which they preserved, truly, and it's an astounding feat that they did this. Texts that really and truly, when compared all around the world, have only let me just give you this, 304,805. Wait a minute. 304,805,000 letters in the Hebrew Torah, right? When they've compared these from different ages and different all across the geography of the world, there's at most been found 6 letter nuance differences. I mean, come on, that's 0.0000.4, I think it was. You just don't get that by being haphazard, okay? So the word tradition, it means to come from close beside, to give something from close beside. It's a handed down. It is properly defined as to give over or hand over or to deliver in a sense of close personal involvement. In other words, it's the root word for discipleship. Okay, a very close and intimate relationship where you are passing down, handing over something very precious. It is discipleship at its best. It is, as Jude calls it, this faith, this tradition that it was once delivered and handed down. In 2 Thessalonians 2:15, he says again, therefore, brothers, stand firm and cling to the traditions. This is not a bad word. He's talking about the same word, what has been handed down, what is properly given hand to hand from close beside each other and passed from generation to generation that we taught you, okay, whether by speech or letter. Okay, so there's 2 ways to transmit. You can by letter, obviously, writing of the text, which pretty much I don't think everybody understands how incredibly awesome the scribes have done this through centuries. They found the text of Isaiah in the Dead Sea Scrolls that compared with our text today, and I think there's like about, minimal 6 to 10 letter differences, and between the Septuagint and texts they have found that are 1,000 years apart. I mean, there really is this is something, so when people throw that straw dog argument, they couldn't possibly copy that stuff accurately. Well, you're just totally dead wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. You tell them it is an unbelievably successful transmission, okay? But it is they call it the oral tradition. The Oral Torah is handed down in an oral tradition. I am not making this up. Now, what we come to find out, which is really interesting, and I've said this before, we have no idea. See, we think oral is like a weaker tradition. See, this is my thing. You don't understand who we're dealing with. Our patriarchs, our ancients, our progenitors, our fathers, our ancestors, whatever you want to call them, way more healthier, lived longer, had better minds, had access to much greater information. That's my opinion, but that is really what the witness bears out, the testimony, everything bears out. Here's a quote from this John Foley, a researcher, a scholar who wrote a book called Signs of Orality. He says, indeed, if these final decades of the millennium have taught us anything, it must be that oral tradition never was what we accused it of being. It never was the preliminary technology of communication we thought it to be. Rather, if the whole truth be told, oral tradition stands out as the single most dominant communicative technology of our species as both a historical fact and in many areas still a contemporary reality. Because many cultures, not just the Hebrews, have unbelievable oral transmission traditions. So oral tradition, now let me say this, a couple things, is information, memories, knowledge, a storyline, so to speak, a body of knowledge held in common by a group of people over many generations. But it is not oral history. Okay, they're not, and you're not sitting at a campfire, just kind of bumping your gums, telling some stories about your ancients. This is a highly oral tradition refers to the recall and transmission of specific preserved textual and cultural knowledge through vocal utterance. As it is an academic discipline, it refers both to a set of objects of study and a method by which they are studied. It is highly skilled. It is highly, you have to be smart, it's diligent. It is, and this is, I say this, these are PhD level type of career paths, okay? You don't just become, wake up one day and think, oh, I'll just start orally. These are highly fine-tuned traditions passed on by highly fine-tuned individuals. Now, not only were the ancients capable of memorizing large amounts of information, but there also existed among some a certain disdain. I have some really interesting quotes I'm going to read from the ancients. See, we just don't understand. And this is the rewriting of history, of our history. It's just the most amazing thing to me. There existed amongst a certain disdain towards the written word and towards books themselves. Socrates himself never wrote anything, and Plato relates his teachings in conversations rather than detailed treatises or summarizations of information. What are lifeless and can be easily misconstrued or twisted to mean something other than intended is why it had such a derogatory, it actually did have a very kind of almost derogatory aura about it in some ancient circles. Now, I'm going to come to a couple Bible verses, but let me just keep reading you a couple of examples of how the ancients did this. So Socrates continued to tell Phaedrus that those who think writing can yield any positive results, especially in the disciplines of the arts or philosophy, which is philosophy really, again, is another code word for oral tradition, must be quite naive and truly ignorant. In the end, writing serves only as a reminder, but not as a teacher, a true teacher. This, he contended, had only come through face-to-face conversation and personal interaction, the definition of discipleship. This is what we should have been, we have a very low, oh, it's the end of the age. There's no point. I mean, just like come Yashua, I just want to go into the millennial kingdom with Yashua. I want to get into a really good Torah school, and learn this stuff. But it is not, discipleship is not the watered down thing we think it is today. Oh my gosh. Anyways, here's let's see, for example, here's a couple more. Hippias of Elis, a Greek sophist and contemporary of Socrates, was able to memorize the genealogies of all heroes and men, their settlements, and in a word, all ancient history. Try to do that, okay, of a people. When pressed on this issue by Socrates, he replied, "Let me hear them once, and I'll memorize 50 names." Pliny the Elder once claimed that Cyrus was able to name every single person in his army, thousands of people, and some of that same era were known to have been able to recount the names of every citizen in Rome. The Platonist Charmanides, who lived 164 to 95 BC, was able to recount whole books in the Library at Athens from memory. Seneca the Elder claims that he could recall 2,000 names or 200 disconnected verses in the order given or in reverse order. Now, the Vedic texts, okay, which are Hindu, I think that the Brahmin texts, the Vedic texts were orally composed and transmitted, without the use of script, in an unbroken line of transmission from teacher to student that was formalized early on. This ensured an impeccable textual transmission superior, in fact, something like a tape recording. Not just the actual words, but even the long-lost musical tonal accent, as in the Old Greek or in Japanese, has been preserved up to the present. This is by a scholar, Michael Witzel. Okay, so again, I don't think we really understand what we're dealing with here. We are dealing with highly sophisticated. Now let me see, because there is nothing new under the sun. So it's a big thing today. They think they've discovered all these new ways of retaining information. They sell all these books today on how to sharpen your brain, and because we are all loose. I mean, I can't remember what I did yesterday. I can't remember half the time when I go into a room what I'm there for. We live at the end of the age, people. We are a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy between everything they're putting in the air and the water, and it's everything, I just say, come Yeshua, come. Now, there's something they're discovering, and they've named it the Mnemonic Systems, okay, which are techniques or strategies consciously used to improve memory. They help use information already stored in long-term memory to make memorization an easier task. A mnemonic, the first or memory device, is any learning technique that aids information retention in the human memory. Mnemonics makes use of elaborate encoding, retrieval clues, in imagery as specific tools to encode any given information in a way that allows for efficient storage and retrieval. This whole thing, like trying to remember somebody's name. There's all these, how to, remember a color that they wore, remember the places, all these different little things. The ancients, they considered the mind. See, this is something that we have totally lost. This is why we don't understand what philosophy is. We don't understand this was the highest order you could attain in terms of how to have a mind, an amazing mind, okay, to be able to retain information, how to disseminate rhetoric. There's so many things to philosophy that we just have lost and don't understand. But here, mnemonics aid original information becoming associated with something more meaningful. It allows the brain to have better retention and information. It is commonly encountered in, used for lists in auditory forms, short poems, acronyms, memorable phrases, and visual or kinesthetic forms, okay? Now, let me say, this is why there's two things. So there is an oral tradition of retaining information to be able to be spoken orally, to be retained, and to be able to. Now, let me give you some biblical examples here, okay? And this is what is going on a lot of times in our Bible, and a lot of why we have this type of literature in the Bible. One is that there's a story here in the Septuagint about how the Septuagint came to be. 72 scholars, and this is, let me just say that this story I'm going to tell you is found in a pseudographic letter to Artrius, the letter of Artius to his brother Philocrates, and is repeated by Philo of Alexandria and Josephus. So to me, it's a pretty reliable story, and by various later sources, including St. Augustine. The story is also found in the Hebraic tract Megillah and the Babylonian Talmud. So that's a pretty good. It says that 72 Jewish scholars were asked by the Greek king of Egypt, Ptolemy II Philoppolis, to translate the Torah from biblical Hebrew into Greek for the inclusion in the Library of Alexandria. Now, that's the history of how the Septuagint got written. Okay, now let me just tell you something about the Library at Alexandria. And there were many fires. This is one of the great losses of the ancient world was the Libraries of Alexandria. It's in it's really around Cairo. It's northern Egypt. Okay, great center of learning. And it's huge Jewish populations always through all the centuries. Some 40,000 book scrolls were destroyed in the fire. There were actually 3 fires that progressively just wiped out all of the libraries there. But the great fire, so there were over 40,000 book scrolls connected with the Great Library of Alexandria. Many of them were account books and ledgers containing the records of Alexandria's export, business, and is a great port city for Rome and other cities. However, the Royal Alexandrian Library was not the only library located in the city. There were at least 2 other libraries in Alexandria, the Library of the Serapeum Temple and the Library of the Caesarean Temple. The continuity of literary and scientific life in Alexandria after the destruction of the Royal Library, as well as the city's status as the world center for sciences and literature between the 1st and the 6th centuries, depended to a large extent on the presence of these 2 libraries. It says historical records indicate that the Royal Library was private, used by the royal family as well as scientists and researchers, but the libraries of the Sephirim and the Caesarean temples were public and accessible to the people. And I tell you, they also say that there were over 100,000 books of Enochian literature in these libraries. We have lost so much. But this is the story. So it says that King Ptolemy gathered 72 elders or sages. I mean, these are probably these are probably priests. Okay, because really this is the job. We don't really understand the importance that we owe to the priests and the Levites, to the Kohanim, the awesome responsibility that was given to them, entrusted to them. So, the king gathered 72, I will say priests. He placed them in 72 chambers, each of them in a separate one, without revealing to them why they were summoned. He entered each person's room and said, "Write for me the Torah of Moshe," which would be the first 5 books, the Pentateuch of the Bible, "your teacher." And then it says they got put in the heart of each one to translate identically as all the others did. Now, I have to say, I think it's sort of added because they couldn't even believe, because they all did accurately, totally accurately wrote the Torah, the same one. So when they compared it between all 72 of them, it was basically the exact same thing. And they did this from their mind. So these are people, this is the point. This is not a made up concept. The oral tradition was, these people are so steeped in it, and that they could do that. They could write out the whole book of Moshe and have it be completely, basically identical with 72 other priests. See, I just don't understand what we're dealing with here. So let me go on here to say, now there's a flip side. Okay, so this one I just want to say is because, all right, the other thing, Kabbalah. Oh my gosh, another buzzword. Oh gosh, it's so funny. And I don't blame people for having, because I would have 5 years ago. I mean, I was like, Kabbalah, woo, big scary word. But you got to understand, as a researcher, you have to research things. You have to try to get the correct understanding of these words. And I'm not afraid of any of this stuff anymore. The Kabbalah, see, let me tell you something. Kabbalah means tradition. This is the whole point. It means it is the body of the Oral Torah, basically the allegorical understandings that were passed down by the priest generation upon generation upon generation. Okay, that's what it is. Kabbalah means tradition. It means handed down. This is what they were doing. I'm trying to tell you this. And this is Jewish Kabbalah. All right, listen to my YouTubes, and I'm all over this, and somebody's like all freaked out because, I call myself a Kabbalist. Well, no, I'm not really a Kabbalist in the sense of I have not even begun to master the writings in that genre of literature. You just don't, Gentile Christian, don't throw these words around. You don't know what you're talking about. You have not been taught properly, okay? Jewish Kabbalah is not Hermetic, occultic, Freemason, New Age Kabbalah with a Q that's out there. What you're seeing out there, in the popular culture and in the secret societies, that's not. Now, they have stolen parts of it, yes, and they do use it. The Freemasons, you got to understand something about them. They are syncretic. They take from everybody, and they put it in a soup, and they rewrite it, and because they're building, they're also master, quote unquote, builders. They're building a whole new worldview, okay, that is going to include a little bit of everybody's thing. They're trying to make everybody happy. It's very syncretic. That's not what we're talking about in Jewish Kabbalah. This is a handing down oral tradition that is coming straight down the pike, and it's coming through a lineage. Adam, through the bloodlines. When you get to Abraham, it says that Abraham obeyed all the laws, the customs, the Torah, the law, everything. I wish I had that verse right in front of me, and I don't. Every single word in it completely corresponds to the Moshe's time, all right, where they had the law. Okay, it isn't like the law was just all of a sudden given on Mount Sinai. That's another story that we just have at a kindergarten level. The Oral Torah, the Kabbalah, is a body of Jewish literature in which they transmit it orally. And this is why a lot of people get tripped up with the stories. They can't believe that in the 2nd century, and I can't remember his name, when he did write it down, because again, this stuff is really, really oral. That is the way it was supposed to be, because it was supposed to stay within a very small disciple to disciple, master teacher to disciple, so that you understood every nuance of what was being passed. Yeshua was very much discipling his disciples. Okay. What was I going to say? In the 2nd century, he was in a cave because of, what was happening in Jerusalem. He was forced to flee, and he wrote down much of this. And people can't believe it. Like, how can you write down all these volumes of information? It just, if you are if the priest could do it to write the Septuagint, the whole book of Moshe, see, again, we don't understand what we're dealing with. We need to grow up and understand the meat of what we're dealing with. Let's stop being kindergarten level, just shake our heads at everything, okay? This is the same concept. Then in the Middle Ages, when it was written down again by another, because master teacher to disciple, he was able to disseminate it, to write it down again. This is the same story again for Esdras. See, people have a problem with this, but I'm sorry, you're just going to have to grow up and get over it, okay? For Esdras, it says, and it came to pass when the 40 days were, this is the story of the books, the esoteric books that were given to the wise, again, through the story of Esdras at the time of the destruction of the first temple when they came back from Babylon, and the books had been destroyed. The tradition, and this is another piece of the puzzle. This gets into, this is sort of like another layer of the story you do have to understand. They did take this oral tradition. See, this is what we're dealing with. That was given to Moshe again. Because we're in a war. It's lost its found and lost its found. It really is the story of what's been going on. Moshe received, again, this whole concept. He talked to God face to face. This is, I don't think we understand the crime about a discipleship. The master teacher, the master rabbi is teaching his disciple Moshe, okay? He's getting it. It's oral. It's this part of this is an understanding. You have the exoteric law. You got the 10 commandments. You got something everybody can understand and is supposed to keep, and it's not a 3rd grade, a baby can get it. A 3-year-old can understand. Thou shalt not steal. Okay. But the oral tradition is it's a transmission of a much, deeper and, I don't want to say important. I don't really know what the word is. Higher level body of understanding. See, this is why people, another trigger word, initiate. Oh my gosh, people. We need to reclaim what is an initiate is a totally benign word. All it means, again, if you're initiate, you are in this teacher-student relationship because of the pure, all things are pure. I'm not saying that the Freemasons don't have traditions that and it's very nasty and dark, and the rituals, the things they do, okay? But that's their issue before Yah. I'm talking about the holy remnant, okay? We have our own set of esoteric knowledge. So grow up, Christian. Understand this, okay? And if you want to be part of the elect in the last days, this is what we are supposed to be about, reclaiming this. The house of Ephraim has priests in it, okay? Levites, people who are called, we're all called to be priests, where we can get into this information, we can get this understanding again, all right? And it isn't going to come out of channeling, he's not going to drop through deep study and researching back in the Torah schools of the house of Judah. You don't, okay? It's a PhD. So when I say an initiate, it's like having the PhD understanding. You have passed the course load. You have done it precept by precept, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade. You kept going up Jacob's ladder. This is really an important principle to understand. Nobody's faulting somebody. See, I'm just talking to a certain kind of person with a certain gift mix. If you're going to be a teacher, you're going to be a teacher in Israel, there are certain standards you have to keep. You have to do your homework. It's not optional, all right? Okay, but back to this. I was going to talk about 2nd Ezra. The Sanhedrin, the great Sanhedrin, okay? They called out 120 of the best and the brightest of the generation at that time. And they did encrypt, they did encode, they did sort of figure out a way, and this is in the Hebrew, of putting these allegorical understandings into the text. Okay, now again, that's a fact. I didn't make it up. Because one of the things, so Ezra is told, and it came to pass when the 40 days were filled that the highest spoke, saying, the first that thou hast written, publish openly for the worthy and the unworthy. And that's our saying, there's the exoteric understanding, there's the esoteric. But keep the 70 last, the esoteric understanding, that thou may deliver it to the wise among the people, those who are in the transmission tradition. That's what he said. There's an oral tradition, a transmission tradition that of the wise. If you're in that category, it is for them so that they can have the spring of understanding and the fountain of wisdom and the stream of knowledge, which is another way of saying they can have revelation knowledge and spiritual understanding so that they can understand the allegorical concepts that is in there. All right. Now, Kapha, and this is something that's really, let me just say this. So another way of doing this, transmitting, even for your people who are not called to the transmission tradition, you still want your people to know their heritage. Okay, this is totally important. The 185 songs, there are 185 songs in the Bible. 150 of them are their psalms. See, psalms is a huge way of transmitting. Oh my gosh, this is one of the things we don't understand about psalms. It's a transmission process through song of transmitting oral allegorical information. But 35 of them are not psalms. And this is why you have this whole concept of the song. I had a little thing here because it is really through song. This is a lot of ways. As it were, in ancient world, ideas, customs, and stories, and even history were committed primarily not to books, but rather memorized through poetry and song. That's why you had the great poets, Homer. These people, they would transmit the whole oral tradition, the whole oral tradition of their people group, whatever, through poetry or through song. So you have the song in the wilderness in Numbers. You have the song of Moses and Joshua in Deuteronomy. You have the song of Deborah and Baruch in Judges. You have the song of David's victory in 1 Samuel. You have the song of the bow, you have the song of songs, which is just an amazing piece. You have Ezekiel's lament over Tyre, and he's then told up by the Lord to take up another dirge, which is sort of a lamentation for Tyre. Jeremiah was very big on lamentations. These are all ways through song, and it's not just singing little worship songs. See, this is another thing we've lost. You're passing on great mystical truths, and there is a cadence. There's a lot to it. All right, so I can get to, but in the New Testament, let's go with Jesus and his apostles sing a hymn in the upper room after Christ's Last Supper. They're not, see, liturgical. This is one of the things about the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, the number of liturgical works, and they're found extra psalms. Another we do not understand. The temple and the amazing liturgical and the singers, what they were doing. They were constantly transmitting. So wherever the people were, they were hearing their oral tradition in song coming out from the temple. And when they entered the temple area, see, there's so much more to, I think I like this new, tradition transmission concept. Okay. Paul and Silas sing a hymn when they're in prison. The 144,000 of the redeemed sing a song before the throne of God, and it is a song that, only they know. So you kind of tell me there's something very esoteric. I mean, you want to say something's gnostic. That's probably the most quote unquote gnostic. But no, there's a song that only the 144,000 know. Okay. So that is in the concept of this oral tradition. It is real. It is Hebraic. The Jews don't have a problem with it for some reason because of the way we've been schooled. Gentiles, especially in the West, we just freak out at anything that is a little bit out of our sixth grade comfort zone. Now, this is from the Sefer Yitzhar. Now, I told you that as a Kabbalist, as I was saying, this is a huge concept of tradition transmission. Okay, but Kefa says, there's a letter, Peter's letter to James. Kefa says the same in his letter to James, which I've taken from the appendix of the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, okay, which is the writings of Clement. This is a huge body of work that, again, researchers, you should be reading Clement, and you should be reading Philo, and you should be reading Josephus. I mean, there's just an amazing amount. These are things that as elect teachers in the last days, these are the things that we should be, in my opinion, this is all my opinion. Well, no, this isn't really my opinion. A lot of this stuff is factual, but this part is these are the things we should be reading. Okay. One of the reasons, well, before I do that, I want to say this. Okay. I was going to talk about the Kabbalah for a second. There's the Sefer Yetzirah is a work that is ascribed to Abraham. It's a hugely apocryphal work. I mean, it's like all in these words, the way they use the words, you just immediately go into reading, you're like, oh my gosh, what are these people talking about? Well, they knew exactly what they were talking about. This is a huge transmission of oral tradition. And the thing is, it says that the words, we're not really sure what they're referring to. Okay, and remember, allegory is a lot of times written specifically, fantastically, or what was the third thing I said? The other thing I said, or non-rationally, so that you just don't pick up on what that they're saying. It just doesn't register to the rational mind right away. Okay, but it talks about how Yah created the universe with 3 books and 22 foundational letters. Okay, and 10 Sephrith of nothingness. It's just, we just don't understand what they're referring to. But let me break that down a little bit for you, because it's very beautiful. It says, it'll say there's 3 mothers, 7 doubles, and 12 elementals. The thing about Hebrew and I've talked about this, is in its glyph. And this is another thing that we don't understand how you can orally transmit huge amounts of information through symbols. Especially when you know what the symbol represents. A picture tells 1,000 words. Okay. There's 3 elements. There are 3 books, because if you read this, I think it's in a couple other places. It says it in Ezra too, that he created the world with 3 books. Okay. But they're not books like we think. We're not talking about a book. We are talking about ways of origin. Okay. These are the origin processes by which Yah began the process, and it's continuing to go, of creation. 3 mothers, 7 doubles, and 12 elementals. But let me say this. He says there's 3 books, which represents text, number, and communication, which in another set of words would be, this is the kinds of 3 letters. So you have the letters of the 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, 22 letters. Numbers, there are 10 numbers. The first 10, every letter in Hebrew represents a number. So in other words, you have text, you have writing, you have math, you have the numbers, and you have voice, which refers to the oral. Or you have voice, breath, and speech. These are different ways of transmission. These are different ways of communicating, and these are different ways of structures. I mean, it's so deep, and I love this stuff for you. So I'm going to really, I love it. Wrap my mind around this concepts, but these are things, this is what we have to understand. So Sefer means book. There are 3 Sephers, okay? And we know this, and this is sort of a Kabbalistic. This is why you will see with the diagram of the Sephirim, 10 circles, 10 symbols, and the 22 letters are going around it, and you have the numbers, okay, because it's communicating. This is what it is. It's an oral transmission of information, and if you don't know what you're looking at, yeah. Okay, so the other problem is, the other thing I have to say is this idea that, Okay, so are there errors in all of this transmission? Well, yes. But it's, first of all, we know from the actual texts themselves, the transmission, there's very little grammatical error. Like I said, 6 letters out of, I don't know how many different texts they compared, okay? There are unbelievable laws. There's over 1,000 laws of grammatical laws about writing the Torah, how you do it. It's a huge process. Again, being a scribe, and I'm not talking about the quote unquote, the scribes and Pharisees in Jesus's day. I'm really talking about a much healthier scribal tradition. When you have, the beginning of Israel coming out with Moses on down to David and to Solomon into the kingdom. And as the kingdom divided, because once Ephraim got divided and separated, was scattered to the nations, well, their oral transmission that's why it's scattered all over the place, okay? But the house of Judah did still, despite all odds, in my opinion, do a pretty amazing job. The thing about these grammatical laws, they don't just tell you how to copy, a word. It's all about how to transmit in the arrangement. Oh, there's so many things. And this is something that people who are studying Hebrew are beginning to see. And I have to give a shout out. I love Dr. Stephen Pitchen and his site, because he is one person I've listened to who I think is really getting it in the Hebrew, the grammatical, seeing it rules, that there's all these ways that they communicate information. The size of the letter, sometimes a letter will be deliberately transposed. Sometimes there will be special spacings. Sometimes, like they'll kind of put a word like all by itself. There are certain whole sections that are kind of bracketed. There are sometimes a word will be deliberately misspelled, Sometimes a word will be like an adjective will be used as an adverb. These are all clues, ways in which when you understand that they're telling you something, and then you know how to decipher it. It's how you do codes. Okay, so that's going on. And a lot of people today are really, they're getting that. And it's amazing to me. So there is that whole concept of the transmission of the text. But it is really more, I wanted to impart tonight, this whole concept of the oral transmission. And to explain to you that our ancients had unbelievable skills and laws and a whole highly sophisticated, like I said, like PhD concept of how to transmit and accurately, and it is accurate, we know this today, oral understandings, okay? So all that being said, I think I kind of said my piece tonight. I know that in my mind there's something else I wanted to impart to people. But this is an important understanding, in my opinion, because, again, I'm going to hone in on some of these trigger words and try to explain. One of these is the canon. Canon is really kind of a Greek concept. To a Hebrew mind, let me make 2 quick parting statements. The canon isn't what we think of today, like books in and books out, like, oh, those are forbidden books, you can't read them, and these are the only orthodox books. That's not how it works. That's not what they're doing. There are 24 books that are given to everybody. This is called the Septuagint. This is the Old Testament. This is called the books of Moshe, whatever, or, the Torah, the Tanakh. This is the 24 books. This is esoteric knowledge that has been given to everyone, okay? Saint or sinner, doesn't matter. First grade, or, I still read. I mean, it's beautiful. We're not putting it down. You have to understand something, but it has a purpose. But there is a back door. There is a behind the scenes oral transmission, oral Torah that backs it up. And it's coming right down from out. So this is what I think we need to understand as Gentile Christians, as Hebrew people, as we're coming into this thing, and not be so quick to just dismiss something because it's, it offends our sensibilities. And about Kabbalah. I'm only about Jewish Kabbalah. All right. This has to be really clearly understood. There are texts. I have a friend. Yes. And I did a YouTube with him. And I know some people have a hard time. It's really, but listen, this is the thing. And I have another friend that I talk to who is a Jewish Kabbalist. Abiyahu is a completely believer in Yeshua. That's why we can able to really communicate well, because we do understand Yeshua and the new covenant, but I have another friend who is not, quote unquote, a believer in Yeshua, is very Kabbalistic, but from their point of view, it's really because they're very afraid to there has been a reluctance on the House of Judah to put this information out there too publicly, because of the track record of the wrong people getting their hands on it. This is the point. I'm going to end with this letter from Kepha. This is what Peter said about Paul's writings. So I have said, people, I'm sorry, Paul was a master Kabbalist. All right, he got this stuff. The oral tradition. No, that's not my note. Let me just find this one little verse. I have to go through what I had. So there's this letter that he says that many of the writings of Paul hard to understand, and many people distort them. In other words, they're not handing them down correctly, the information. There is a way to this is something, and this is the problem with Gentile church, where we're so far afield, we've totally lost this concept. We didn't even know for 1800 years that we really did have Hebrew roots. I'm sorry, we thought we were the Gentile church, we totally replaced Israel. We didn't even need them anymore, our brothers over there, so much revelation is coming down the pike. But Kepha says, which is Peter, in a letter to James the Just, who is the bishop of the Jerusalem church, he says, but these men profess, I know not how to know my mind, to undertake to explain my words, which they have not heard from me. This, in other words, he's saying there was no teacher to disciple transmission of understanding here. I never spoke to them, telling their Talmudim that this is the meeting, which indeed I never even thought of. So in other words, this is what Paul is saying, and this is what Jude said, that infiltrators were going to come in and they were going to skewer the understanding. All right? But if they dare thus to represent me, how much more while I'm alive will those who shall come after me dare to do? Later on, Kepha asked Yaakov, which is James, to guard his letters and teachings the same way that Moshe guarded the oral instruction, or the oral tradition, or the oral Torah. They're all the same. He'd received from Yah. Like I said, let's think of it this way. Talk about a master teacher to disciple relationship, face to face. See, this is what they're talking about. Completely close communication skills. Kepha says that he has the same motivation as Moshe. This will keep the faith everywhere delivered, the rule of truth, explaining all things after our traditions, lest being themselves dragged down by ignorance, being drawn into error by conjectures of their mind, they bring others into the like pit of destruction. So, elect, we have a job to do. Let's do it with maturity, humility, but let's do it. The world is waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God. So on that night, I'm going to say good night and shalom, and I will see you again. Love in Yeshua's name.